Hi, and welcome to the West Point Lake Update. I'm your host, Steven Rector, Park Ranger with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We've got a great show planned for you today on prescribed burning, so stay tuned. We'll be right back after this short break. Hi, and welcome back. Joining me now is Kevin Parsons. Kevin is a natural resource specialist with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Kevin, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Kevin, today's show is all going to be about prescribed burning. And one of the things with you I wanted to specifically talk about was there's a lot of training that is done before any of these natural resource specialists are out in the woods, all the way back into college with fire management courses. Can you explain a little bit about not only the college coursework that you've been through, but some of the Georgia certification courses that you've had?
Yeah, a lot of times people think they just go out and they're in the woods and just start setting fire, kind of like what we do. But there is a lot of training and education that goes in behind that. All of our staff, the natural resource management staff at West Point Lake, we all have degrees in either forestry or wildlife management. While we're in college, we actually take prescribed burn courses that are usually a week to a month long, depending on what school you go to, where we actually get on site. We'll actually do some burning, learn everything about the tools that we use, learn about fire behavior, fire weather, and things like that. But it doesn't end there. Once we get our degrees, we all have bachelor's degrees or master's degrees. We actually go through burn certification. Of course, for us, we went through the Georgia Forestry Commission's burn certification program. It lasts 2 days. It's a good course. It's a good quick course, but you actually have to have a lot of prerequisites before you do that. You actually have to be what we call fireballs on at least 5 different burns before you can even qualify for that course. So you actually have to have the college degree, the education with the prescribed burning while you're in college, get that real life experience on the job training, and then you have to go to the certification course as well. So it's not just like you can go out there and just start lighting fire and just leave it and we burned everything up, it's good to go. So.
And the reason I wanted to ask you that question was because I didn't want to give our viewers the impression that this is something very easy to do, that you can just go out into the woods and start setting fire to different areas. I know, in fact, for us with the Army Corps of Engineers, that you have meetings all year long and you set up burn plans and determine what you're going to burn and when and where. And could you tell us a little bit about how you set up a burn plan, both short-term and long-term?
Yeah, long-term we have a 10-year burn plan for West Point Lake. We'll go to different areas. We have 2 main areas. We have recreation areas and hunting areas. The recreation areas are usually on a 5-year burn plan. That means we're burning them every 5 years. And the main purpose of that is just for fuel reduction. In the hunting areas, we have either a 3-year burn plan or even a 2-year burn plan. And while fuel reduction is an important aspect of that, we're also trying to improve wildlife habitat. We can go in there and kill out some unwanted species and things like that, and release nutrients back in the ground and kind of manipulate the habitat to our liking. So,
and it's just there's so much training and planning and development before you even get to go out onto the location that you're going to have this prescribed burn. But even then, you're not ready to set fire to the woods. There's a significant amount of prep work on site that you have to do, from blowing and raking. And could you tell about specifically, I guess the recreation areas require the most work?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would do before we burn an area is I want to find out what the wind is. How long has it been since the last rain? I want to make sure the conditions are optimal. So once I've done that, I go and decide, okay, this is a good area right here. Let's take Schaefer Herd Campground, for instance. If we wanted to burn that campground, we usually burn it during the off season, so there's a low amount of visitors there, so we're not going to impact them. But we'd go in there, we'd take a look at any bathrooms, any type of campsites, electrical outlets, shower houses, signs, any type of structure. And we'd go in and we either rake around them. We have backpack leaf blowers that we can use to put lines in around these structures. We also have a water tank that we can put in, what we call a wet line. Basically, what we do, we start a fire, let it burn a little ways, and then put it out with the water. That way, it doesn't burn up to the building. So, and that usually takes 1 hour to 2 hours just to get everything ready, so we're not doing any type of damage during the burn. That way, we don't have to worry about it. And even when we've done that, we still carry rakes and things like that with us just to make sure. Just we have a contingency plan, because you can't ever be too careful when you're dealing with fire. So.
Yeah, I understand that there is a lot of work, and even, I guess, before you get to that point, then you also have fire breaks put in before you arrive on scene?
Yeah, some of our areas, we can use the paved roads as fire breaks, but a lot of them we actually have to have breaks plowed for us. And we'll actually have the Georgia Forestry Commission or the Alabama Forestry Commission, because as you know, part of West Point is in Alabama. They'll actually come in, a few weeks in advance and put these breaks in for us through the woods. Most of them are existing breaks, but obviously, over 3, 4, 5 years, develops a layer of pine straw and leaves and stuff, so it needs to be plowed, before we burn again. So we'll come up with a list of all those areas that need those breaks, hand them to the forest commissions, and they'll go out and do their work.
And I just kind of realized that I may have thrown a term out there that our viewers might not be familiar with. Could you take just a few seconds and explain specifically what a fire break is and what purpose it serves?
Yeah. Fire break is basically an exposed area, whether we use a paved road or we plow a road or plow a break. And what that is just an exposed area that doesn't have anything flammable on it. And what happens is the fire will come right up to that break and it'll stop, because obviously dirt doesn't burn. Like I said, those breaks over time, they'll get pine straw and leaves built up, so we have to clear that off. But once they're plowed, we can go right along that break, let the fire kind of back its way off of it, and that way it doesn't skip over into an area that we're not wanting to burn.
Kevin, some great information. I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Joining us now is David Scott, Natural Resource Specialist with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Dave, thanks for being on the show today.
Hi, Steve. Good to be here.
I wanted to ask you about some of the safety equipment that the park rangers are wearing out there on the prescribed burns. And in some of the video that we have, you can see them wearing some different kind of clothes than what we're wearing today. Could you explain a little bit about that equipment?
Sure thing. When you're on a fire, of course, you need certain types of clothing to protect you from the heat and from catching on fire. A lot of your standard cotton clothing, or even worse, your polyester blend clothing, if that were to get with fire, that could melt and cause a skin burn. So what we have is a certain type of clothing called a Nomex that we use. And it's a style of clothing that is designed to take a direct flame or the heat for quite a while before it actually catches on fire or melts or anything of that nature. And so we wear Nomex pants and a Nomex overshirt or a jacket kind of design that protects all of our other clothing, our undergarments, that sort of thing, and keeps, if a amber lands on you or something, it won't immediately catch on fire or melt. It can withstand a lot of heat before it ever changes its properties. And so the other thing, really important is our boots. You can't just wear standard boots that you see at that you wear every day, because a lot of them have different type of nylon or polyester blends mixed in with it, and so we have to have full grain leather boots, no steel toes, because steel toe can transfer heat from outside to inside. Usually they have specially designed fire boots, which most of us have. You don't necessarily have to have that. It's good to have, like I said, just full leather and a thick sole so that the heat doesn't transfer through very quickly. And of course, when you're out in the woods during a fire, you have trees, small trees even, that are kind of burning in two, and so the dangers from something falling is always there, and so we have to wear a hard hat right on these fires. And then, of course, last but not least, is a good set of leather gloves, something that you can work with comfortably, that you want on, because all these things, we want every inch of skin as much as possible to be covered to protect you from heat and possible burns.
Sure, and I understand with the leather gloves, because a lot of times you're using these specialized tools, particularly the drip torch, and you've got that fire very close to you. Could you explain how that drip torch specifically works? I know it's got some unique properties.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, one of our tools that we use out there is called a drip torch, and it's basically a 1 gallon or 1.5 gallon metal can of fuel, and we put a fuel that's a mix of diesel and gas together. And it's not as fast burning as straight gas, and it'll catch on a little easier than diesel does. And what it does, it has a spout out the end, and then it has a wick on the very end that gets saturated with that fuel, and it'll light on fire. And so that wick will stay and burn, and as you tilt it over, the fuel will pour out of the spout and runs across the top of the wick, catching the fuel on fire. Then it hits the ground, which then catches the ground on fire. This helps us speed up igniting a forest fire very quickly. You know, we can walk down the road shoulder or down a trail and leave a string of fire behind us, which really speeds up the process. Otherwise, we'd have to stop with a cigarette lighter or something, or match, you know, every few feet and start a fire. And so this really speeds that up.
And I was talking to one of the other resource specialists, and they were explaining to me off camera about the curl that is in the drip torch and how that curl serves a special purpose.
That's right.
As well.
Yeah, like you said, the spout comes out, it makes a curl, and then it continues out to the wick. And what that does is when you stand it back up, that keeps any fire from coming back and getting into the actual can itself and turning it into a bomb, essentially. And of course, that's another reason that we use that mixture of fuel, so that it's not so volatile like straight gas would be. And so, you know, those things protect you. I've never seen one, you know, do anything out of the ordinary. They're very, very handy tools, and we use them a lot.
And then there's a couple other tools that we see you using a lot, and one of them is a rake, and I know it's a specialized rake, and I wanted to ask you to talk about that a little bit. And the other one was called a flapper, and the name might kind of confuse people a little bit. Could you talk about those two specific tools a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, our fire rake is a type of rake that's designed, it has 4 triangle-shaped teeth along a metal edge, and it's got a long wooden handle, kind of like a standard garden rake. But those teeth are kind of sharpened, and what it is so when you drag where a normal garden rake or a metal tooth rake would kind of hang on roots and things, this is designed with those angles to cut through those roots. And so it makes making a fire line, if we get in the, you know, where we have to make a fire line, we have to kind of dig down. You have to get past all of the things that could burn, past the pine straw, the leaves. You have to get down and disturb the dirt. That's what creates that barrier that keeps the fire from going from here to the other side. And so use that kind of those kind of rakes, and you know, they work a little harder than a standard garden rake, but they do the job a lot better. Then, like you're talking about the flapper is just what it says. It's a large rubber flap on the end of a wooden handle, kind of like this on the rake. But you don't use it like the name sounds. You don't flap at a fire. What you do is you lay it on top. It's you know, a couple feet long probably. It's flat, and you just lay it on top of the fire, and it smothers the fire out. And then you drag it over to the next spot, and you just walk along. That works really well in grass situations where we have a grass fire. We can just lay that flat right on top of the fire edge, and it'll put it out almost immediately. So
the rake is going to be primarily used to dig a fire line to prevent fire from getting into a certain area, and then the way I understand it would be, if for some reason that fire does get into that area, the flapper will help smother it?
Yeah, your rake is mostly for your pine straw and leaf, your wooded areas. Then once you get out in the field, you pretty much go to the flapper then.
All right, Dave, some great information. I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Thanks, Steve.
And stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Hi, and welcome back. Joining me now is Derrick Wilkerson, Natural Resource Specialist with the Army Corps of Engineers. Derrick, thanks for being on the show today.
My pleasure, Steve.
Derrick, I wanted to talk about, and earlier we discussed all the planning and the preparation work and the equipment and the safety gear that we wear, but when we actually get to the point of setting fire to an area, what is it that you're looking for and watching for, and you know, just tell us how the fire behaves and what all different things can infect it.
Okay, sure, Steve. The main factors that we look for, even before we even think about doing a prescribed burn, is temperature. You got to have the right temperature, the relative humidity, which is the amount of moisture that's in the air, We look for the wind, how fast the wind's blowing on that particular day, and also the amount of precipitation that we've had before the burn, whether it's 2-3 days ago, but before the burn. Typically, after precipitation, of a rain of some sort, we normally try and do a burn. Probably minimum time frame is probably 48 hours or so. That way, it gives the area, time to dry out with those factors that I just mentioned.
You mentioned relative humidity. I know that relative humidity really, that affects a lot of
Correct.
Different aspects of a prescribed burn. Can you explain a little bit about, all the different things that relative humidity impacts?
Okay, sure. Based on our plans, for West Point Lake, the project itself, we normally try and do our burns anywhere between 25%, which would be the minimum, to a maximum of 50% of relative humidity, which of course, anything below the 25%, you're pretty much going to have a lot of fire danger factors, so to speak, which, if you call your local Georgia Forestry Commissions or your Alabama Forestry Commission, you're pretty much probably not going to get a burn permit for that particular day, if the relative humidity is below 25%, meaning that the fuels on the ground are a lot drier versus having a relative humidity of 50%, which you have a lot more moisture in the woody debris or the fuel that's actually on the ground.
So the higher the humidity, as I understand it, not only does it impact how well things on the ground burn, but it also affects how the smoke goes up into the air.
Exactly, that's correct, Steve. If you have drier fuels on the ground, the fire is going to move a lot faster through those drier fuels, which at the same point in time will give you a better lift of the smoke. It'll make it a lot more visible faster to move throughout the area.
But if it's kind of one of those, if you can see it and it's up high, that's good because that means it's not settling down on the road. That's
correct, Steve. And you'll find that if you have some of the fuels on the ground that have a lot more moisture in it, the fire it'll burn, but it'll burn a lot slower, which of course at the same point in time entails it to smolder, so to speak, and it wouldn't lift as well.
And one of the things that you're, I'm sure, watching out for is to make sure that it's going up high enough and the wind's not carrying it into neighborhoods or across major roads or something like
that. Yes, as far as the wind speed and the wind direction, those are major factors as well. We definitely wouldn't want to do a burn on that particular day, if the smoke's going to blow in a residential neighborhood or if it's going to blow towards a school or something like that. We do understand that there's people in the public that have different histories of asthma, things like that. So if they come in contact with smoke, that can greatly affect them.
Yeah. I know I get a lot of questions from visitors and people that I run into that they always want to know why when a burn goes through an area that it doesn't actually catch the live standing trees on fire. Can you explain how that works, why we don't see the pine trees or the hardwoods burned down?
Sure. Most of the pine trees, the majority of the pine trees are fire adaptable here in the South. You may see a pine tree, from time to time that may be burning inside, and that's due to an open cambium layer where the sap resin has started coming out of the tree, and that will tend to catch fire and burn inside of the tree. Or if there's an open exposed area that's rotted there in the root system, the fire tends to kind of creep underneath the root system and burn inside of the tree. But from time to time, it has to have some open area or that the fire will be able to get into and kind of burn inside out.
So when you say that the pine trees are fire adaptable here in the Southeast, that outer bark is really, I guess, sort of created a protective layer?
That's correct.
And so the fire, just as long as there aren't any what you would call open areas or wounds or scars, it'll just pass on around
Exactly, that's correct. And again, like I say, that factor goes back to having the right temperature, the right relative humidity, the right air, wind speed, so to speak, as well. So.
And then just one last thing, as you're setting fire to a certain area, and you kind of walk around the outside and you do a lot of inspections before you actually set fire to it. But once the fire is actually on the ground and it started moving through an area, what do the natural resource specialists look for and watch for with how the fire is actually behaving?
Right. Well, mainly, you know, we can kind of tell based on look if the wind direction changes or if the speed of the wind picks up. We can, you know, also determine if the relative humidity has increased or if it's lowered. Most of it's based on experience as well. But you know, mainly if the wind speed picks up, you mainly want to look for embers, which, you know, is just basically some part of the fire, whether it's leaves, part of the sticks, twigs, that, you know, have just caught part of the wind and blown from the burning area to an area that's not being burned, and that's one of the things that we do not want.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Right.
There's work from the planning stage all the way through, even after you set fire to an area.
And then even after we're finished burning on that particular day, the following morning, we'll actually go back out and kind of double check the fire to make sure that, you know, we don't have a fire started somewhere else as well.
Derrick, some great information. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Joining me now is Ben Williams, Natural Resource Specialist with the Army Corps of Engineers. Ben, thanks for being on the show today.
Good to be here.
Ben, I brought you on. I wanted to talk specifically with you about why it is so important that certain areas be burned on a, I guess, relatively frequent basis, 3 to 5 years.
Right. Well, we have two objectives when we're doing a burn. One is wildfire risk reduction, and the other one is wildlife habitat improvement.
And so the wildfire risk reduction, now that's about burning off fuel loads.
Yes.
Could you explain what a fuel load is to our viewers?
Fuel loading is anything on the ground that's going to burn. So leaves, pine straw, logs, limbs, things like that have fallen. That's what is considered a consumable fuel when you're talking about prescribed burning. So the less of that you have, you reduce your risk of having a catastrophic wildfire in an area that could potentially kill the large overstory trees or even run to a residential area.
And I've been out on a few of the burns that you've had over the last few years, and there is a significant amount of pine straw out in these areas that you're burning.
Yes, there is. There's a significant amount, and in some areas we're not able to burn just because we can't get there to burn it in a safe manner. So a lot of those areas stay high loaded in fuels, but generally those are kind of away from where people interact with the land. But when we come to an area that we want to burn, that's one of the things we look at is how much fuel is there. That's how we adjust our plans sometimes. And
then you said the other reason was for habitat improvement. Can you explain a little bit about how prescribed burning in certain areas benefits habitat?
Right. Well, the southern forest is a fire-adapted forest. The pines are very fire tolerant. Hardwoods not so much, but usually hardwood areas we do not burn in. Sometimes a small spot may get burned, but it's nothing that's going to damage anything. But when you go in and you burn up that fuel, that allows sunlight to reach the ground for seeds to germinate, and that gives us the herbaceous material that white-tailed deer, turkey, rabbits, things like that tend to like to browse on.
How quickly after a prescribed burn do you start to see some of that material start to grow back?
You'll start seeing it the first growing season after a burn. So if we do a burn in January or February, April, May timeframe, you're going to see green stuff growing back.
And is that specifically why you're looking to burn in January and February, so that by springtime it will have recovered enough to start?
Yeah, that's normally what it is. The burning season for the southern United States is usually December to April, especially where we are. The farther south you go to the Florida Panhandle, South Georgia, South Alabama, it gets extended. But that's normally our burn season. That's when the humidity's right, when the fuel's right. That's just the easiest time for us to do it and do it safely.
And since you mentioned safety, can you just explain a little bit about if a visitor is kind of in an area and they see a lot of smoke, or they see the signs that we posted that there is a burn in the area, some safety precautions that they need to sort of keep in mind?
Well, if they do find that they're in an area, that's okay. What they need to do is slow down, especially if they're in a vehicle. Slow down. The posted speed limit in the parks is 15 miles an hour, but they need to go less than that. And especially turn on their flashers, because a lot of times the personnel like myself, we can't see the cars when they come by because we're focused on getting the burn done. So if they could just slow down, be on the lookout, that's probably the best thing.
And I know we talked earlier in the show about specifically the safety equipment that the people that are going to be conducting the burn are wearing. So,
Right.
you know, I'm assuming people need to know that if they see those folks, those are the ones that they need to pay attention to.
Right. If you see somebody dressed in a bright yellow shirt, that usually lets you know something's happening. So if you can see that ahead, then you know you need to go ahead and start slowing up.
And then we try to post as much as possible
Yes.
ahead of time, but you know, and I know we talked all about the weather and
Right.
how different factors are involved, but we don't get a whole lot of warning out to the public on which areas we're going to burn.
Right. A lot of times that decision made is the morning of. We know what areas we want to burn, but conditions really dictate where we burn and when we burn.
And so I guess for our visitors, the thing is to pay attention to our Facebook page. We try to post to our Facebook page when and where we're going to be burning. And then I guess we just ask that visitors really pay attention to the signs and then any park rangers that are going to be in the area giving directions to them.
That's right.
Well, Ben, I appreciate you being on the show today. Some great
Good to be here.
information. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after this short break.
Welcome to West Point Lake. My name is Rebecca Fink, Park Ranger at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I love the wildlife here at West Point Lake as much as the next person does. And when you're out here at the parks or the beaches with your family and you've brought food with you, that food belongs to you. Please do not be tempted to feed the wildlife here. When you feed ducks and the Canadian geese that we have here, they can become very aggressive. They associate people with food, and they no longer become afraid of people. They will mob you, approach you in very large numbers, and sometimes be very aggressive towards adults and children. We also have a big problem with them pooping at our beaches and at our many parks, which can cause a lot of health hazards to the children, and if you step on it, you're also bringing those harmful bacteria into your home. So just a quick reminder, please avoid feeding the wildlife here at West Point Lake. Enjoy them from a distance and feel free to take pictures. Thank you.
Welcome back. I want to thank all my guests for being on the show today. For more information on the Prescribed Burning program, including where and when we will be burning, please like us on our official Facebook page at facebook.com/westpointlake.usace. I also want to take one final moment to remind our viewers, please do not attempt prescribed burning on your own without the proper training or certification.